Hey folks, Matthew Weiss here, WeissAdvice.com. Couple of apologies real quick. First of all, this is not the best lighting time of day, so if the lighting gets kind of weird and I start glowing like I'm just coming back from heaven or something, my apologies. Second of all, apparently a helicopter has decided to land on the roof of my apartment complex out of nowhere, so I apologize for the noise in the back. But I want to get this video done and I'm not going to have a lot of time to do it, so I'm doing it now. Okay, all that aside, what are we talking about? So in a lot of my videos, I make a point to show the things that I'm not doing because I think overprocessing is a problem that a lot of people first face when they're learning to mix records. However, there are times when a lot of things do need to be done in order to get something to work the way that you want it to work. So this is going to be a video on processing the low end and getting all of the low end elements to agree, and it's going to require a few steps. All right, let's jump on in. Let's play this just as it came in. Now, hearing that, you might be thinking, well, that doesn't seem terribly problematic, and I would agree. In some ways, it's not, but there's a few things that are kind of a little messy. First of all, the 808 is kind of masking all of the other drum elements. Second of all, there's like this kind of weird crunch going on in some of the drums that makes it sound like it's flamming in a weird way, and there's just a lot of crowded sound in there without a lot of dynamics. And all of this is going to get exacerbated as I start stacking things like low mid elements, upper mid, and treble elements. It's going to just get messier and messier as we go. So I'm going to put on my processing now. And this is what I've got as the foundation for the low end. So I've cleaned it up quite a bit. It's not finished, it's not perfect. There's a hand drum in the main loop that's sort of receded a little bit, and I want to make sure that I can bring that back out, so I'll probably do that maybe even in this video. But I want to break down the ideas in terms of what I'm doing here. So there's a bunch of stuff going on. First of all, I've taken the main kick drum and I've copied it onto 2 tracks because the kicks here are kind of functioning a little differently. You've got your downbeat kick, which has to sound really heavy, and then you've got these sort of in-between kicks that kind of fit as part of this percussion pattern. So these guys right here, they're part of this whole sequence. They're not exactly part of the kick, in a way. The kick is more this guy. And then that complements these downbeats on the 808. Alright, so my main focus here is making sure that, first of all, these all get along. So a little processing on this kick. I want it to be more of like a dembo kind of kick, so I'm boosting a little bit of the low mid-range. And it's a little higher than we typically see boosts. In fact, a lot of the times we're cutting this stuff out of drums, but dembo drums really love this lower mid to like mid-mid kind of range. It's almost more like a kick meets a percussion element at the same time. The other thing that I'm doing here is I'm watching my phase. I'm always checking my phase. And so as this loop goes by, I'm actually flipping the phase so that it agrees with the 808 better, just so that we have like more strength on the downbeat. Okay, then we get over to the second layer of kicks, and there's a little bit more going on here. We have the phase flipped the whole time. It just felt better to me. And then we're doing something a little different to this kick. We're taking out sub information. We are not doing exactly the same boosts here. Well, we are doing the same boost here, but we've also got this high kick here. I see, I took this boost out. Okay, so we've got the same boost here as the main kick, but we're band passing some of the lows and highs. So that's a little bit different. The other thing that we're doing here, this is just a makeup gain, is using a gate, because if we listen to this very closely, we can hear that there's something excessive in the tail. So I'm just kind of taking that tail down a little bit. And I think I should slow down this attack a little. There we go. There was a little clicking showing up. All right. Then lastly, there's sort of this like kind of clipped tone, and if we look at this, we can actually see that it's pretty squared off. I don't mind clipping tones as much as some people do. It is like a certain square wave thing, but to me it just becomes a different kind of texture. The problem with it is that it takes away from the punch, and sometimes that texture can make things sound really grainy, particularly when there's a lot of layering going on. So I'm using a Transient Designer to emphasize the transient, bring back some of the hit, and also downplay some of that clipping in the sustain. So you notice how that also seems to kind of clean it up a little bit? Alright, and then lastly, a little bit of EQ here. Just kind of reshaping things, focusing it more on that low mid, again, taking out a little bit of lows, also dipping a little bit of where I can hear some of that clipping distortion, which is in the upper mids. And so this is just a little bit of extra tightening to help it all come together. So this really makes it more like a percussion instrument and less like a kick, although it's still definitely a kick for sure. So now when we're hearing it with this main loop, it sounds like, is it a kick, is it a percussion, is it both? It kind of functions as a percussion. If I take this stuff off, just sounds kind of like a grainy kick. Yep, that helicopter is kicking, speaking of kicks. All right, so then taking some lows, some deep lows out of the percussion loop. This is because I have plenty of deep lows in the 808. And then kind of doing the same thing here where I'm just sort of opening stuff up a little bit. I need to go back and I need to rework some of these sounds, but we have some of the same kind of clipping going on, particularly in some of these hand drum areas, and it's causing this almost flam-like effect, like right here. It's a little weird sounding. So by enhancing the transient and taking down some of the dirty sustain that we've got, it cleans it up a little bit. Not much though. But overall, it makes it a lot more percussive. But I would say this is probably the smallest of the differences, so without it, with. Makes it a little groovier, everything like that. This is probably the processing that I'll reassess the most because this is where I feel like I'm making some compromises that I don't 100% love quite yet. But now going over to the 808. So if I play the 808, the biggest problem with this is that the 808 sounds really cool on its own. But it really covers everything else up when it's all played together. So I want to be able to still get the rest of the percussion elements. The other thing is like, I really want that big, beefy sub range. I'm not totally getting it. So the first thing I'm doing here is grabbing a Pultec style EQ, and I'm pulling down, or pulling up a bunch of 30 hertz, and then also cutting at 30 hertz. And that might feel a little bit weird, but it's because the thing about Pultecs is it's the shape of the slope that makes things work. I'm pulling up 30, but what I'm really trying to affect is 40, 50, 60, 70, the stuff that's above it. And then I am also cutting in turn, but by doing this small cut, it's actually a more gradual cut, so it's going to take out a little bit more of like 100, 200 kind of stuff. And so that shape makes things kind of blend a little bit better, get together a little bit more nicely, and then doing a couple dB of reduction on the back end to make up for the big boost that I just did. And now all those inside elements become a lot more audible to the ear, which is what's really important. Now, I could leave it at this. I don't think that that's bad, but I felt like I really don't need a lot of the mid-range that's happening. The mid-range in the percussion elements is so important that taking out mids in this 808 totally works. you know, a lot of the times we don't think about taking out the mids of an 808, but most of the time our 808s don't have this much in regards to mid-range. But here we have a ton of mid-range in this particular 808, so I'm not going to open things up and make room for kick drums and stuff like that by getting rid of the sub. The sub is what I need in this 808. Instead, I'm going to open things up by getting rid of the mid-range that I don't really need. And then lastly, there's just this sort of like one little part of the mid-range that I didn't like, but I wanted to bring more buzz to the 808 because I kind of missed that brightness that it had before. So this is the way that I'm doing that. I'm pulling up the brightness and then I'm pulling down the stuff that starts coming up as I'm pulling up the brightness, if that makes sense. So it's a cut to the mids again, but it's also coming along with this big boost to the what is the brighter side of the 808. And then the last thing that I want to do here, and this is actually really important, is that this 808 doesn't feel dynamic enough to me. It's very flat, it's very streamlined, and it kind of just sustains and drones in between the percussion hits. So I'm going to put on some volume automation right here, and it's not like the most dramatic. In some places it's a little dramatic, like here, but for the most part it's pulling up the sustain almost in like an EDM-ish kind of way until the next hit comes up, and then it's dropping back down. And then here, this little pickup is getting boosted. So the 808, it's kind of acting almost like a compressor would, where the 808 is kind of filling up the space in between the percussion hits. And that's going to create this illusion of a much bigger low end. And then I just copy and paste that all the way through. So it's a lot of work to get this low end to come together, and I'm not even done. I still need to get the hand drum in the percussion loop to kind of sing a little bit. So that's going to take a little bit of effort, and I'm not completely done with some of the dynamic stuff that's going on here because some of the inside hits feel like they're coming up a little bit too quickly, and so it's kind of remasking some of the percussion stuff that I've been trying to open up this whole time. So it needs to be fine-tuned a little bit, but in general, that's the way that I'm approaching it. Now, is there a formula? Is this a technique? No, this is not a technique at all. This is me hearing what I'm hearing, saying, okay, there's this like weird crunchiness going on with some of the sustain because of how hard the drums have been clipped. You know, there's this weird dynamic that isn't quite working, coming together. The kick drums are functioning differently in different places. They're out of phase in some places, not in phase in the other places, in phase in some places. And so I'm just going through, I'm correcting every error that I'm hearing as I'm hearing it. That's not a technique, that's just good engineering. All right, guys, if you dig this video, hit that like button. If you want to catch more videos like this, then hit the thing that does the thing. Comment below, tell me what I'm trying to say to you. If you got any questions about this video, hit the comment section below, or if you just want to pop in and say hi, I'd love to hear from you. Lastly, if you think there's anybody who would benefit from this, hit that share button. And finally, you know what we say. We are musicians. Sound is our instrument. I will catch you next time.